Thank you tonight, and welcome to tonight's Capital Improvement Plan City Council and Planning Board joint work session. I'd like to thank the Planning Board for being here, along with department heads, members of staff, the council, and of course, all of the citizens in the room, where we will, of course, have public comment at the end. I'm going to pass it over to the city manager to run through the presentation, and then we're going to get into a discussion amongst all the folks at this table and listen to the comments from the public.
Thank you, Your Honor, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for those who are here in attendance, and thank you to those following along at home. And if you are following along at home, the presentation that you'll see tonight, along with the entire draft CIP document, can be found on the city website, not only for your review tonight, but moving forward. So we are pleased to present the new and united and the biggest work session table ever, so that we can all meet together and hear the projects and understand the flow and how one may interrelate with the other as you hear the presentation from all of the staff. This will be the one time that staff runs through the entire presentation, and at the end we'll remind folks of the schedule from here. So thanks to the staff who are here. We have two new staff members that should be introduced to you all. The first is our new Deputy Finance Director, Michael Tucker. Michael is here and has been here for a couple months now. We're thrilled to have him shadowing Andrew Pergel. And we also have new School Business Administrator Brian Cisneros, who took Nathan Lunny's position. Brian will be here backstopping the superintendent. So thank you both. So if possible, and at the risk of being a little rude, we'd love to hold questions till the end. It will be easier as we roll through all of the slides. And with that, we will jump right in. So first and foremost, what is the CIP and why do we need one and why do we have one? This is a slide we use to provide introduction at every CIP conversation, but by way of reintroduction, it's a way to identify needs and to prioritize those needs on a short, a medium, and a longer-term basis. And it's really a plan for all of us to follow to guide in the continued maintenance of our infrastructure and to prioritize that infrastructure. Quick reminder on what qualifies as a CIP project, and this is also baked into the language of the CIP, but it's things of a capital versus operating nature is the quickest and easiest way to define that. The CIP historically has been broken into these sections. We kept the sections in the order they've always been. And following along on the regular section are the very helpful appendices that speak to all of the citizen requests we've ever received, along with state projects that may have a bearing on local projects, a studies list. New would be how to read an element sheet. Always in this CIP would be maps, and then new list of acronyms. So in terms of the fast facts or the fun facts, there are a total of 96 projects tonight, 5 of which are new from departments, 5 of which are returning from departments, 86 that were carried over from the previous 6-year CIP, and 13 that were removed from the CIP, and we'll explain that. Remove means they've headed into project implementation land. New to the CIP would be pieces of the element sheet that provide additional project information relative to impact on operating budget, a new acknowledgement of percent for art, contribution to certain projects, and green building where that may be applicable. The Level C projects is new to this year's CIP, and it speaks to projects that are pushed out beyond the 6-year CIP planning horizon. We'll speak to that more, along with the new appendices I did mention just a slide ago. What I won't spend time on, but what you are welcome to take your time with, is the way that the element sheets lay out. But the arrows on the screen show the new places where we've made impacts to the sheet. As mentioned, operating budget impacts, percent for art and green building consideration, and you'll see percent for art following along down where the allocation of funds belongs. This is an example of a Level C project, a project that we have that we would recommend and have recommended moving beyond the planning horizon of the traditional 6-year CIP. And for those of you trying to track this historically, the original funding and year are placed in the notes of changes in funding box. And I'll try to point to it, but it's really hard to see. It's in the green right there. So this project will appear as a project sheet for 1 year as a priority Level C project, and then the next year it would be removed unless it was brought forward. We are, for the third year, happy to provide this breakdown of citizen requests. And when I say the third year, what we did was we held a citizen request subcommittee meeting for the third year. This year, we received 15 submissions, 3 of which are eligible for consideration, 5 of which speak to existing projects, 6 that are not eligible to be considered in the CIP, and 1 that would be best suited for another process. And the ones that were declared and deemed eligible fall into these 3 categories. The Sustainability Committee has requested 2 projects to be considered. One would be a microtransit feasibility study, and the second would be a fleet decarbonization plan. And the subcommittee has asked for additional information from staff before proceeding. So you will not see it in the FY26, but you will see it in out years when we have the ability to research it. For school playgrounds, this was not brought in as a citizen request, but it was discussed at that time. And concurrent with that process, the school submitted an element sheet to speak to school playgrounds, and as such, it will be included in this year's CIP. And third was a request by Portsmouth Little League to place lights at the Plains Field. We heard lots of feedback, and since the meeting that was held in October, there have been numerous emails received expressing concern or objecting to the lights. So at this point, the staff is not recommending, and there is not an element sheet for the Little League lights. This is a summary sheet for projects that are new to the CIP, and I'll call your attention to the vehicle replacement for a fire engine number 1, as just mentioned earlier, the elementary school's playground update, a municipal building audit, a solar battery study with opportunities, and police communications radio system replacement. Here's the list of projects removed from the CIP because they were either authorized or combined with other projects, and this list is here for your review. So, as you are aware, we have 2 ways to fund capital projects. The first would be cash or capital outlay. We also like to refer to it as pay-as-you-go. Our goal is to fund up to no more than 2% of the prior year budget, and we always work within that goal. The capital outlay is not 1.18 in the small print. It is in the final analysis 1.17, which is a funding request of $1.69 million, or a 3.2% increase above FY25. And I would ask the Deputy City Manager for Finance Administration to give a really quick synopsis of why capital outlay is disproportionately low and what pieces used to be there that you'll find elsewhere.
Thank you, City Manager. I would just wanted to make sure everyone noted that in the non-operating portion of the budget this cycle, you will see elements that have traditionally looked like capital. For instance, body camera and taser project that came before the council some number of months ago will show up as a non-operating, as though it were a subscription-based internet technology like we talked about in the last budget cycle. So we're seeing growth in the non-operating in areas that are traditionally capital, and as a result, we want to accommodate room for that and stay modest with our capital outlay request.
Next would be our review of debt service, and to remind folks, the city's goal for net debt is to remain below 10% of the budget, and the net debt percentage was 8.16. We're coming in at 8.15 this year. You will see in the out years, it does, as it always does, tend to creep over 10%, and as a reminder, we always do bring it back down under 10%, but at this point in time, the projection is 8.15. This is another synopsis for how projects are evaluated and prioritized. Are they a must-have? Do they provide a financial benefit? Or is it more of a nice-to-have? And those are the 3 categories within which we evaluated all requests. These are some global thoughts that we put together that we would like to remind people of. That first and foremost, this is a plan. This does not commit anyone to any funding, even after adoption of the plan. That happens later as part of the budget. What we are excited about this year is that to have an adopted CIP 3 months earlier than normal is to help better inform the city's budget process, which will be undertaken shortly after the first of the new year. And a good reminder to this group and to folks watching at home that any newer identified projects would be subject to the same funding resources and limitations. And really, the movement or addition of one project really does have a ripple effect and impact on all the other projects that are currently in the CIP. both in terms of dollar amount, timeline, and ability to complete. So with that, this is the last slide I have. It speaks to the timeline. We've gone through citizen requests. We've had that meeting. Tonight is the work session and large presentation. We'll have 2 public hearings coming up, one a week from tonight, a week from last night with the City Council at a regular meeting. And there will be, the Planning Board will look to vote to recommend to the City Council at their November 21st meeting. And if all goes well, the adoption of the CIP would be taken up by the Council on December 2nd and therefore incorporated into the formal budget process. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to ask the police chief to lead us off once I pull up the slides.
Just go to the bookmarks. Or we can just do it this way.
Thanks, Abby. Go ahead, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. On our first slide here, as stated previously, this is a non-operating expense for police body cams and tasers. We'd already entered into a contract based off of FY25 to bundle these together to get a better price. And this is a payment plan over the next 5 years, and the 6-year out is a renewal for the final cost of $540,000. Go to the next one. This is moving on to the new police department facility, as this has been previously in the CIP in previous years. In FY25, we used $1.4 million previously bonded. In FY26, we look to bond an additional $2.8 million for the design and concept of a police facility. Moving on to FY27 would be the remainder of the $38 million for a total of $42.2 million. And you'll also see the additional art that's added to the project of $300,000.
Thanks.
Good evening, City Manager, City Council, and members of the Planning Board. I'm Zach McLaughlin, Superintendent of Schools. I have 4 element sheets for you this evening. The first is school facilities capital improvements. You'll notice that this has been an element that's been present over the last several years. This is basically used to maintain our 7 buildings across the district around major upgrades, which include paving, roofing, infrastructure. If you go to the next slide, it breaks down over the next several fiscal years where those monies are going to over the next 2 cycles. A lot of that energy is going to paving and exterior lighting improvements, primarily at Portsmouth High School and roof replacement projects. I will just also note that in terms of, if you look out to FY30, one of the last element sheets for us, we'll talk about the CTE Center being up for state funding. We're going to we are aiming to piggyback improvements on the part of the high school that is adjacent to the CTE so that we'll be take the most advantage and create the most synergy in that project in FY30, and that's why that's there. Next slide, please. Then we have the elementary schools upgrade. This is part of what also has been a rolling project after the district had an external assessment of its elementary schools done in 2016. The work that will be done in FY26 and FY29 will be at New Franklin School. That's going to focus on accessibility, school entrance safety, and some storage issues. Amongst the specifics will be access to the stage, updates to the firewalls as part of those projects. Next slide, please. This, as I mentioned before in the first element sheet, generally, effectively, CTE centers are on about a 25-year cycle to receive funds from the state. The state funds those projects at somewhere between 50% and 70% of the project. We anticipate that our Career and Technical Education Center, CTE, will be up during the 30-31 biennium. We estimate the project currently as a $10 million project and with a $3 million local contribution in FY30. And as I said before, from the other element sheet, we'll be looking to make sure that we do some air handling work in the adjacent part of the high school at the same time. So, next slide. This is new this year, and the city manager mentioned it previously. This was a citizen's request last year, and then we went through a lot of conversation this year with some of the citizens who felt like this was a project that really needed to move to the top of the list. The discussion really has come back to the fact that there had been some conversation about this being the type of project that would be funded through PTAs, that sort of thing. I think in researching the history of these projects, there's some mythology around the fact that that is actually the case. Some of those projects have been funded in part through PTAs. The challenge is twofold, I think. One, and I think the citizens who advocated for this did a nice job of talking about the fact that this is a core function of what we do. Two, that now, based on new regulations, the next time that we break ground to update, there are going to be enhanced expectations around ADA access, things of that nature. So this turns these projects, these are not $50,000 projects, these are $500,000 projects. Those are not things you could expect folks to make on bake sales and other types of things. So that moves this project in as a new element for this year. Thank you.
Good evening again, councilors, planning board members. The next three elements speak to our historic and permanent records. The first requests $100,000 in capital outlay in each year of the CIP for permanent records storage facilities. The state requires us to store permanent records in accordance with RSA Chapter 33A, and in FY18 we got started upgrading City Hall archives. We have a space in the basement that serves as that archives, holding documents that date back to the 1700s. In recent years, we've been able to invest and establish a waterless fire suppression system, humidity monitoring system, and archive quality shelving in that space. This funding would support current space maintenance and upgrade, and anticipates the preparation of and relocation to new storage space as that can be made available moving forward. The second is historic document restoration, preservation, and scanning. This element requests $150,000 in capital outlay in each year of the CIP. The restoration project that was launched in 2018 followed the discovery of a cache of historic books having been improperly stored that were breaking down and were contaminated with mold. And again, some of these dated back to the 1700s. These funds then provide for very specific documents, scanning, cleaning, repair, and encapsulation when necessary to secure and preserve these documents. I want to share with you at your next council meeting, you'll be asked to accept our 8th Moose Plate grant through New Hampshire State Library, and that of the $9,000 to support that effort, bringing the total grant support to date to just shy of $75,000 from that Moose Plate. Thank you. The third, then, is disposition of municipal records. This element requests $25,000 in capital outlay in each year of the CIP, and where the last two requests have spoken to the repair and preservation of documents and to the maintaining of archival space for those documents, this request calls for the scanning and digitizing of permanent records, most specifically those that are actively utilized by staff on a regular basis. This investment provides a definitive backup for our vital information, and at the same time, it provides more efficient and accessible access to information that are important tools for the work that we do each day.
Good evening, City Council and Planning Board. For those that don't know me, I'm Laura Horwood-Benton. I am the Assistant Library Director, so I'm filling in for Christine tonight. And on this slide, you'll see the Historical Archives Committee, which received $150,000 in fiscal year 2025 to conduct assessment of our historic records, which need to be conserved and stored. And this process is ongoing at the moment. We're partnering with other local historical organizations who are funding their own assessments, including the Historic Society, Strawberry Bank, and the Athenaeum. So the committee has pushed their next ask out to fiscal year 2027, since these assessments are still in progress. These funds would be used to study what kind of building we need, and we're hoping that matching funds will be available. So they would be looking at what kind of space, security, and things like HVAC and temperature controls for the long-term storage of these materials. Just a fun fact, this project has been discussed and attempted several times in the past, but this is the most buy-in and progress we've had in recent memory, so that's very exciting. And Councilor Lombardi is on the committee with Christine and can answer questions as well. Thank you, everybody.
Good evening, City Councilors and Planning Board. This is a request that originated with the Public Art Review Committee, and this committee plans to apply for state and federal grants in the future, and as many of you know, state and federal grants sometimes require matching funds from the applicant, and this is the primary purpose of this request, which started last year and looks to continue.
Good evening. The Health Department is requesting $150,000 to assess and possibly reinforce buildings that we use for sheltering and emergency response, and that will be requested for FY27.
Good evening, Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. This slide speaks to land acquisition.
Peter, can I interrupt you? Grab a mic.
Oh, sorry.
Kevin says you're hard to hear.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. This first slide speaks to land acquisition and the Conservation Commission's effort to keep some money in the city's fund for land acquisition. This is pushed out for 3 years for the next amount, but there will be a big project, as everybody knows, to use up part of the conservation fund on the Cavaretta property. City of Portsmouth Master Plan update. The vision document the city uses to guide development, to guide where the city wants to go. It serves to direct other sections of the master plan and looks at the land use section. The last time this was updated was in 2016. We're currently working on developing an update for, it'll be in the beginning of this year. We'll have more information. There's a RFQ out right now to gather information and to develop our next master plan. The funding for the master plan right now, there's $250,000 available, and this CIP item asks for $150,000 in this current cycle. So the next two slides are about the climate action plan, and the climate action plan, where the staff at least wants to try to at least get one measure a year into the capital plan and maybe more. The Sustainability Committee also has some that you heard about earlier for citizen requests. This one is a municipal building audit implementation section, and what we're trying to do is follow up on the Climate Action Plan Priority Action BE6 to audit all municipal facilities. That audit is underway right now by Public Works, and we'd like to follow on that next year with some implementation of some of the efficiency measures that come out of that. Similarly, another CAP item under Climate Action Priority Action RE4 is to encourage the development of community solar with battery backup. This item is for this capital plan and looks at a couple things, but really there's a lot of interest in solar in the community and renewable energy that people can do on their homes and businesses. So this will look at what's available now, sort of level the playing field for people who can get some information from the city that has, a little bit of vetting so that they get a good description of what can be done, and then looks at opportunities that might be available for shared solar with battery and other types of backup systems. This next item is the Bow Street Overlook repair and open. Right now, the Bow Street Overlook's had to be closed because of damage to the deck structure over time. It needs to be redone, but in looking at what needs to be done, there's quite a bit of work on the structure and the substructure, and it hangs out pretty far over the river, so we want to be careful with that. This funding is identified for next year to fit it in with other projects in the city to get that project going.
Good evening, everyone. Todd Henley, Recreation Director. First off is the indoor pool facility needs. This is a capital maintenance plan for the pool. Upcoming projects include locker room and carpeting upgrades. You'll see an increase in funding in FY29 for the construction of new dedicated parking spaces or a parking area. The pool currently only has 22 parking spaces, 20 regular and 2 handicapped, and we currently lease extra spaces from the abutting property and have staff and patrons overflow park on the grass. The Save the Indoor Portsmouth Pool, or SIP Trust, will contribute 35% funding towards that project. Funding for FY26 has been removed as the pool has just completed multiple upgrade projects such as deck drains, deck paint, LED lighting, etc. over the last few years. Next slide, please. The next project is the South Mill Pond Playground. We are currently creating a master plan and playground design for the South Mill Pond area using FY25 funds, and we'll be building or upgrading it to an inclusive ADA compliant playground with future funding for the construction of permanent public restrooms and improved parking. Next slide. Next up is the existing outdoor recreation field and facility improvements. This is a recurring project that addresses drainage issues, improving playability, and court upgrades. Next slide. Next is the Greenland Road Recreation Facility. The skate park was completed in FY24, including parking and access to the rail trail. And as the city manager said earlier, funding for future phases has been pushed outside of the planning horizon.
Good evening. Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. This first element sheet is related to citywide playground improvements, and monies are identified periodically to upgrade the roughly 20 playgrounds in the city. The next identified playground is on the Pierce Island, which is the playground near the pool. Next slide. The Leary Field restoration is beyond the planning horizon. Last year, the City Council approved $50,000 to do minor renovations to bring the concession stand and bathrooms back into compliance, and that project's currently underway. This element sheet identifies funding for additional improvements to the Pierce Island recreational area, things including the boat launch, volleyball courts, trails and the like. So that's for this. Then this project is a continuation, and we're pushing, it's shown as outside the planning horizon at this time. We're currently under construction for the aquatics improvements. If anybody has a chance to go out, you can see the new gutter system that is currently getting installed. It's a pretty interesting process. Once that is done, we'll have an all-new liner, gutter system, filtration, and we are planning on doing renovations to the existing bathhouse, and that should get us by for a while. And so we are pushing out a major upgrade or replacement of that pool house to outside the planning horizon. Like many of our facilities, the community campus is in need for periodic upgrades to various elements of equipment, whether it's HVAC or roofs, and these monies are identified to continue to invest in that complex. These monies are identified every other year for improvements to the citywide parks, including monuments and other infrastructure at the parks. The city's been a Tree City USA for over 20 years. These monies are identified, and part of that designation is that we specifically call out funding for trees, and these monies go towards that the improvement support of this program. Last year, we working with the City Council, determined that protecting the historic structures at Prescott Park was the priority over the overall master plan. So the monies that were identified and authorized last year will cover the raising of the Shaw Building as well as the Players Ring and improvements to the drainage in the area. But the future, any additional monies are pushed out into outside the planning horizon. In addition to the master plan, there are capital needs at the park. You'll see in 27 a $2 million item that's been identified. That's the replacement of the dock system that's out there right now. The wooden docks are in in difficult shape and may not be opened this year, depending upon if we're determined they're safe or not. So these monies are identified for potential replacement of that dock system. The city HVAC system, the City Hall HVAC system is in need of significant replacement or upgrades, and these monies are starting a phased upgrade of the system. The initial monies would be to complete the design and then implement the first phase in 29. We're also working with the energy audit folks who are identifying potential sources of monies and alternative means of funding for a system, and if it's determined that one major upgrade could be done and financed in a manner that isn't shown as a capital expenditure to the city, that will be something that we'll bring forward and make recommendations to. The transfer station at the DPW has been in need of upgrade for quite some time. These monies identify in 29 for this upgrade, and the upgrade would include a swap shop as popularly demanded. Historic cemetery improvements, these monies are identified annually, and the next page has a list of projects. These were developed working with the cemetery committee. City has over 30 retaining walls, and these monies go periodically to do maintenance and upgrades to these retaining walls. The Soundbury monies here are shown as a potential for seeing if we can convince the state to be able to build sound barriers on the southern side of I-95 corridor. Currently, the state has started a project for the northern side, and if you're driving down I-95, you'll see Jersey barriers and things going up. So that project has started, but currently we have some monies, if necessary, to start a design effort if we find a way forward to do that. But currently, it's not deemed eligible by the state, so we're in a holding pattern on that. These monies are identified to maintain the citywide facilities. It's costing more and more to maintain our facilities, and these monies have been adjusted to reflect that additional cost. And the next page has a list of some of the projects that have been identified. This element sheet identifies potential monies for burying underground utilities. This does two things. It improves aesthetics, but it also improves reliability and resiliency for the city. These monies are identified to continue the installation of EV charging stations, electric vehicle charging stations throughout the city. Most recently, we completed 2 charging stations at the Bridge Street lot. This out-year planning horizon project's identified just to reflect the fact that it has been pushed out, and there's a potential at some point for the council to bring it back. However, at this time, it's not high enough priority to be addressed in this immediate horizon.
Good evening, Planning Board and City Council. My name is Ryan Babcock. I'm the Chief Information Officer. Our first project is the information technology upgrades and replacements for hardware across the city. This is a reoccurring request each year that includes computers, servers, networking, and other equipment types. It includes the general city departments as well as police, fire, and school. The total amount in FY26 is $726,250. The included project costs are delineated by specific departments and hardware categories. Next slide. Oh, you're already there. And this slide includes desktop and notebook computers and tablets by department, and the number scheduled to be replaced in the with the cost in FY26. Next slide. And this slide includes server hardware by department and the number scheduled to be replaced with the cost in FY26. Next slide, please. This slide lists other technology replacement and upgrades at each department with the associated cost for FY26. Next slide. And this is the continuation of that list by department. And this slide includes the totals by department for upgrades and replacement across all categories with the project total of $726,250. Next slide. The next project is for cybersecurity enhancements. This project's focus is on physical security, where switches and servers are located. On the recommendation of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, a division of Homeland Security, we continue to work to physically secure all network devices and server equipment across the city. This work includes locking cabinets for network equipment, access control for doors for rooms that hold IT equipment, and cameras to monitor these rooms. The total for FY26 is $125,000.
This next element, folks, refers to a potential upgrade of our financial accounting and human resource software systems. Previously, the element sheet called for non-operating dollars that were being collected towards a purchase and implementation. We've launched an RFP. We generated 9 viable proposals. Committee is currently narrowing the list of firms to demo their solutions, also establishing required elements for each demo that will serve as a rubric to assist us in final decision-making. Total costs involved in the proposed solutions in front of us range from $500,000 to nearly $3 million. This request would bond $1 million and would provide sufficient funding to allow us to engage in active contract negotiations as well as mindful implementation planning as we seek to replace the solution that's been in place now for better than 20 years.
Hello again. This is planning purposes for a new radio communication system. Our current system was new in 2017. The life expectancy is 12 to 15 years. So we were planning on having to replace it again in 2030. And in that time frame, we're just trying to plan ahead, and budget money will be allocated non-operating to build up a sum of money to be available when that project comes forward in 2030. We're estimating the cost of the project could be approximately over $2 million.
This element sheet identifies monies for paving. We allocate a certain amount of money every year to accumulate enough to complete a paving project. The next anticipated project will be the South Mill Playground parking lot. These monies go towards maintaining the meter system, which includes the pay and display, but also the software associated with that. This slide is for the Hampton Branch Rail Trail, and you'll see that there's no funding allocated until 29, but currently we have grant funding to build 2 parking areas for the rail trail, and there's other grant funding out there with the Regional Planning Commission to look at other access and connections to the trail, so you will see work happening around the trail, just not putting it in the CIP at this time. The bicycle pedestrian plan implementation, so the bike ped plan is being updated as we speak. It should be done in early 25, and from that update, we will begin implementation of some of the items identified in that plan. Next slide, please. The Market Street side path has been pushed out in the New Hampshire 10-year DOT 10-year plan. This is a CMAQ project to have wide side paths from Kearsarge out to Woodbury Ave, but that's been pushed out a little bit. Next slide. The US Route 1 side path construction. This is in work that we're doing in conjunction with the corridor study that's underway with New Hampshire DOT that you'll have a work session on the 18th. This is new side path construction concurrent with that work. And also related to that, the next slide is crosswalks and signals. These crosswalks and signals were identified in the study, and they'll be put in with the city's funds starting next fiscal year. This element sheet is a returning element. Like many projects, when you start design, you determine that a number of things need to be upgraded in addition to sidewalks and intersection improvements. In this case, the drainage systems have been identified to need to be upgraded. So we'll be approaching this project in a phased manner. The first phase, which is currently funded, will start at Dondero School and work its way out. This element will build off the multi-use path that has recently been constructed by one of the developers over there. It ends at the back entrance to the Walmart, and it'll take that from that spot all the way down to Banfield Road, which will then connect to the rail trail access right there. Wayfinding monies are identified for FY 31. It's hard to believe the wayfinding program's been going on for over 10 years, so we're anticipating some of the signage and the like will need to be upgraded within this time frame. The Greenland Road, Middle Road bicycle corridor is being reviewed as part of this overall master plan update, and depending upon the results of that master plan, this may be adjusted, but is currently identified for design in 27 with construction in 29.
This next one is Market Square upgrade. This is, the Market Square master plan is underway currently, and that work will be completed early 25, probably January, February. So this is funds to put into place some of the recommendations in that plan. As I said, it's not finalized, but the idea with the master plan is that when we have opportunities to do upgrades in Market Square, we can take advantage of it. So we're putting money aside for that.
The city sets aside biannually monies for sidewalk reconstruction. The next page shows the priority list, and depending upon resources, we're able to either incorporate them into other projects and leverage funds, but this is the current list. And to note, the south side of South Street was identified as a resident request this year. The city has over 25 traffic signals at intersections. These monies are identified to upgrade those signals as we accumulate the monies to be able to address that in a consistent manner. The Miller Middle intersection is slated to go to bid this fall with an intent to be in construction next spring. So that'll be the next intersection signal that you'll be seeing upgrades to. Similar to the traffic signals, citywide, we have intersection improvements that are identified through the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee, as well as requests by residents, and these monies go towards those upgrades. The Russell Market intersection upgrade has been identified as a project for quite some time. It's currently on the DOT's 10-year plan for 26. The matching portion of this is already in hand in previous year funding. We anticipate starting this process with a design effort that would include an evaluation of different options with public input. This item identifies monies for bridge improvements or upgrades necessary to maintain our bridges. The Kate Street Bridge project was slated for 2028 on the DOT's 10-year plan. However, they recently reached out to us and indicated they'd like us to move forward more quickly on that. So we've pulled that forward to 26 along with funding for the matching portion. Next slide. The city received a CMAQ grant to remove the traffic signal at Cottage and Coakley on Route 1. If any of you drive that way on a regular basis, gridlock is a regular occurrence, and this would address that challenge. However, before that can be done, an alternative means for folks to be able to head north coming out of the Coakley neighborhood is necessary, and this connector road is identified, and these monies would cover that. We received many requests from residents to do traffic calming throughout the city. These monies would go towards those improvements. Similar to sidewalks, we set aside money every other year for our road management program. The next page shows some of the projects, roads that are identified. And then like Portsmouth proper, we're responsible for the Pease International Trade Port, and we identify monies every other year as well. And there's the list of streets that would be identified there, that are identified for that. Next slide, please. Junkins Avenue is in need of some reconstruction, including the culverts. This project would also address a section of sidewalk along Parrott Avenue. So this is something that hopefully will be moving forward in the next few years. Pinehurst Road improvements is pushed out of the planning horizon in this case. And then Madison Street is to improve the parking situation out there with some curbing and road alignment improvements. And then finally, the State Street two-way redesign. Based on the information we received from our consultant, there's additional work that needs to be done to better define the costs and impacts associated with this reconfiguration. So we're recommending putting money towards the study and then leaving it outstanding relative to defining the next request.
Hello, everyone. I'm Al Pratt. I'm the Water Resource Manager for the city. So for this first item here, this is to fund ongoing water main replacement projects. There are many water mains in the system that have repeated breaks and are in need of replacement. Also, we have some areas that have lost fire flow that are in need of replacement. This is an ongoing item. Next, well station improvements. There are funds associated with this, primarily for the Portsmouth and the Collins well. Those two wells are going to be treated for PFAS, and we anticipate the Air Force paying for the treatment process. But the funds here are associated with upgrades that will need to be done that aren't directly related to PFAS. As you see, we mostly come out of the FY27 timeframe. Is a reservoir management, nothing in FY26, FY27. We anticipate some upgrades to the intake structure there to manage cyanobacteria, as well as some of the lower dissolved oxygen that we have at the reservoir. So that's a new structure there. And water storage tanks. This item covers the three main Portsmouth water storage tanks: the Lafayette Road storage tank, the Spinney Road storage tank, and the Newington Booster tank. And all of those tanks are in various needs of replacement and recoding. The primary need now is the Newington Booster tank, and that's why we have $5 million slated here for replacement in late 2025 or early 2026. Greenland well treatment. Funds have been previously allocated for a PFAS treatment system at the Greenland well for, I believe, $2.5 million. Additional funds are needed. We've gone through the preliminary design, and we are at the point now of targeting closer to a $7 million project here. So we need additional funds to proceed with that project, and that, again, we hope to take place later 2025, early 26. Water transmission main replacement project. As you all know, this project has been going on for a very long time. We've had success this past year at installing valves in this main, and we are pushing off the replacement of that line into FY27. We will know more about the design and costs associated with that for next year's CIP. So let's put in an out year here. Upgrades to the Madbury treatment plant. Again, this is all out-year money. Primarily, there are projects. The plant is now 14 years old, and we will be doing more work on that. Just on this list is a filter wash water basin that will need to be replaced.
All right. Marek Fiedler, I'm city engineer. I'm going to talk primarily about the wastewater and combined projects. The first project here is our annual sewer line replacement monies. It's a $1.5 million. It's a standard every other year funding for ongoing sewer main replacements. We increased it approximately $500,000 every other year, just due to increased costs that we're seeing for our projects. And the goal is also to package these with other projects if we can get complete streets rather than trying to hit it piecemeal. Next slide. Wastewater reuse, we're currently in the process of updating our reuse study. We should get actually the draft report in another week or two. Monies are moved outside the planning horizon from implementation. We've identified a variety of risks due to emerging contaminants and other regulatory risks. So at this point, we've moved that outside of the current planning horizon. Next slide, please. Long-term control plan projects. We've moved the schedule due to our consent decree. The time and the dates were changed, so we've adjusted our funding accordingly. Next slide, please. This is our recurring wastewater pump station every other year funding. We've increased the amounts. We're seeing increased costs for just doing recurring work. You can see that we've increased it out in the 2031 horizon. We're trying to perform with our staff more in-house improvements. So we're actually seeing quite a bit of cost savings, so we can push out some of those funding requests a little bit further out. Next one, next slide. This is the Sagamore Sewer private connections. This is funding that was previously authorized by council. This is through fiscal year 28. This is to do the wrap up the final connections into our new sewer force main. Sagamore project is mostly complete. The paving was done. I think the road is looking pretty good. So this is just to finish up the private connections. Next slide, please. This is monies for the construction phase of the Mechanic Street Pump Station. I think the council is quite aware of our reliability issues at that site. We're in a feasibility study phase, and we anticipate a milestone in February, March of next year, just about siting, layouts, and other spacing needs. And the goal is to have significant public engagement at that milestone, so we can discuss, some of the concepts available to the city. Next slide. The Pierce Island wastewater treatment plant. These are ongoing capital projects to address things like that were value engineered out during the design phase. These specifically in fiscal 26 and 27 are to look at aging clarifier mechanisms as well as chemical storage improvements. Next slide. This slide is for a combined project. This is the Fleet Street Utilities. This is a consent decree project, but it also includes other opportunities. So it's in the design and permitting phase right now. The city anticipates, we'll split the project into multiple parts, and we anticipate bidding this project in the winter timeframe, or one phase of the project, and then maybe the second phase as well, depending on how the permitting progresses. We anticipate the first start of this project will start construction in 25. Next slide, please. In that, you can see the funding breakdown split between general fund, water, and sewer there, so that's a combined funded project. The next one is citywide storm drainage improvements. We've increased the funding to increase to $1 million a year recurring, just to identify the actual capital needs for our storm drainage collection system. We have 65 miles of storm drainage pipe, and we've identified some significant deficiencies in locations. We have a request of $2 million in fiscal 26 to remedy some of the projects in Elwyn Road and Elwyn Park projects. Like Peter mentioned before, once you start digging into sidewalks, you start dealing with drainage and all the other things associated with that. So, and that's split between general fund and sewer. Chapel Street, this project's already, it's a previously planned project. It's already been designed. The funding has gone up a bit just based on recent bid results. So this one's been on the hopper for a while. Another complete street project. Slide. So it's funded through water and sewer monies. And then the next one is the Creek neighborhood. We're wrapping up Artlet Street. I think the base paving was down. I think that project is looking pretty good. So the next phase is we're starting on the survey phase for the next scope of work, and we're going to pick away at this neighborhood every other year, kind of this phased approach to kind of going through and remedying all the deficient assets, utility assets. So you can see where it's $2.4 million in fiscal 27 and then $3 million in 29 and 31. Next slide. This is a Lafayette Park and Monroe Street improvements. So this is Willard Ave is going to be wrapped up to some extent this year, so it's been a lot of construction over in this area. The city stubbed out a drainage pipe through the Lafayette, across Lafayette Road, and then we can continue on with the Monroe Street sewer separation items. And then fiscal 26 monies, next slide, please. Fiscal 26 monies are for the sewer separation, and then the fiscal 28 and 29 monies are for park improvements and drainage improvements in the Lafayette Park itself, and along with some public amenities as part of that project. Next slide, please. Very good.
Good evening. My name is William McQuillan, and I have the honor of serving as your fire chief. First project for the fire department tonight is the ambulance replacement schedule. You will see that the plan is to keep the 3 ambulances on the road that are frontline, and then 1 in reserve for details and do planned maintenance. This continues that project. Next slide. This slide addresses the city's fireboat. At the moment, the boat that we have, as you can see in the picture, is an open vessel, and this time of year it becomes a little bit more hairy for our crews to be able to operate, and we're looking to get something that's more enclosed, especially for the subjects that we're rescuing and pulling out of the water to get them out of the weather. We're still looking to pursue grant funding opportunities as well for this project, but it is identified here. Next slide. This slide here is to replace Truck 5, the oldest aerial ladder in the city's fleet. This is a scheduled replacement for this vehicle. Next slide. This project is to replace Engine 6, a 2011 vehicle in 2029 for planned replacement. Next slide. This slide identifies, again, the vehicle replacement program for fire engine number 3 for its replacement. Next slide. And similarly, engine 1 as part of the vehicle replacement program. Next slide. This project here is the bunker gear replacement. This is a move-up project. After last year, we had finished a project where we had replaced all the firefighters' bunker gear. This current year, new technology has come out where the PFAS materials have been removed from the gear, making it a safer set of ensemble for our folks to wear. And the plan was to try and move up the replacement of the next set of gear for our personnel so that everybody had one set of gear that had been issued to them that was PFAS-free and safer. Next slide. This project identifies the roof replacement at Fire Station 1, which was last done in 1996. I believe that's it for me. That's it. Thanks, City Manager. We'll open it up to any questions or comments. Start with the Planning Board. Any questions or comments? Chairman Shellman?
I did have a question. One thing this process, of course, comes from the master plan, as you know, and we've noticed both with the study that's recently been done on the downtown parking and applications have been coming to us. It appears there's going to be a need for another parking structure not too far away, and I think it'd be a good idea to put at least a placeholder value, say $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that, in to start the planning. That would be less than half a percent. Still keep us under 9%, well under 9%. But not doing it and not planning for it now, I think it's a $20 to $30 million project probably. I think Peter Rice can probably correct me on that because he's probably more in tune, maybe Ben Fletcher, but it's a significant item. It's going to be needed. If the city doesn't do it, the private sector might step in, which will create a problem in how the downtown functions. Also lost revenue for the city because I think the city should be managing the public parking in the downtown. as it does now. It generates a lot of money. And that's also part of the parking study group that I've been a member of for the past year or so. Has also said many of the things I'm saying. So I think it's a missing element here. I'm not sure how to put it in, where to put it in, or how to talk about it, but so I'm bringing it up.
Chairman Shulman? And from just an order of operations, would that be a recommendation that you would make at the planning board before sending it to, as a recommendation to city council?
Well, the process, as you know, the process can be just at the planning board, or is what the council has done by making this joint group. It's a discussion group that then goes to the planning board to make a recommendation to come back to council as an entirety. But here we are as a group to talk about it, and I apologize if it's a difficult topic to talk about, but I think it's one we need to talk
As
about.
long as we don't agree on the spot before we acquire the
I'm
spot.
not asking
we're-
for agreement, I'm not asking for a specific number, but I think it's a large element that I think is missing in a capital improvement plan that is supposed to plan at least 6 years into the future. The statute says at least 6 years. So by not including it in our 6-year plan, I can't imagine not having it as a part of our plan for the next 6 years. I think that's not good planning on the planning board, so I bring it up.
Well, we can't take any action here, but it seems like as a work session, but certainly to put a placeholder in there would not be something that I would vote to take out. If it reached back to council, it seems good planning, and it's a conversation that would be inclusive of other capital projects within the downtown, so appropriate to bring it up now.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask about housing. The city policy on housing says the city should support new workforce housing and development in designated areas through provision of capital improvements and services, and proactively submit projects which support these principles in the annual capital improvement plan. We've got $250 million and we've got nothing for housing. In the submissions by the Portsmouth Housing Authority, there were a couple examples where they thought some city money on infrastructure could be helpful on a couple of projects that they're interested in. The principle could be more broadly than that. There are 2 or 3 other major projects in the city where we might be providing some component of the water, sewer, roads. What we're doing now, we've got over 500 units, housing units, that are somewhere in the process of approval or development that aren't yet done, but virtually none of them are below market rate. So we might want to put in our toolbox some amount of money in the capital improvement plan that could be used for discussion with developers about an incentive for them to put in some of their units at below market rate.
In terms of something like from the site work, or from the infrastructure work that would be acquired there, if we would take that on, is that the?
That was the suggestion of the Portsmouth Housing Authority on 2 of their submissions, but I think the principle could be more broadly applied. I think I can think of a couple of developers that we've approved projects for that it would have been nice to have had that discussion with them about whether we would provide some road work that would have helped them. And in exchange, they might make some of their units below market rate.
Your Honor, I think Director Rice wants to speak to that.
One thing to just be aware of is that water and sewer infrastructure are enterprise funds, and as such, cannot be used to do expansions without the benefiting party paying for it. So that if there was a decision by council to support the water and sewer, it would have to come out of the general fund. The roadway, obviously, if it's a city council or any of the general fund type of activity, sidewalks, those types of things, would obviously be able to be covered on the general fund. But the water and sewer would need to be covered elsewhere.
Okay. I could see something along the lines if there was a required realm improvements that we would take on as a part of general, as part of the highway fund there. That seems like that might work. Just a quick point on the Sherburne. I do think that there was one request, as I understood, under PHA, but that's an active RFP and hasn't been awarded yet.
Right.
Certainly, if it is awarded, those conversations could definitely commence with the party that wins that bid. But that's a great suggestion. Councilor Tabor?
I was just going to mention too, in the Housing Committee, we're talking about the Housing Trust Fund, and which could be funded by payments in lieu. In other words, developers could get the extra density bonus, but rather than build the below market units, they could make a cash payment to the fund. As that builds up, potentially that could be a source for stimulating more housing, more below market rate housing.
Thank you, Planning Board Member Bowen. Are there Giuliano or Planning Board Member Giuliano or Hewitt?
Sure, yep. I have a question for Mr. Henley.
Do you mind grabbing the microphone, Jim?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks.
And if the slide for the existing outdoor recreational field can be put up, please. It's on page 86 of the CIP. Yes, thank you. I noticed this is a kind of a diagram of the existing fields at the high school, and showing 2 baseball fields. Are those existing fields?
Todd, I could speak to this. This is a historic photo from a study that was done a while ago, and it is the existing fields, and it was just identifying upgrades to those fields. So it's not representative of a proposal that's associated with these monies.
Okay, so this graphic is not associated with the money being requested in CIP?
Not specifically, because those are school fields. So typically the school fields would be identified elsewhere. It was a study that was done to look at existing fields and identify projects associated with it. In
Okay,
addition so there are projects associated with that report, but just not this particular fields. So it's not a great representation of what the monies are for.
Okay, so the monies are for fields elsewhere, like at community campus?
For any existing field that we have.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Because where I'm heading with this is, I'm just trying to nail down the softball field the city's going to lose at Sherburne School. Has the city promised that it will be replaced somewhere, probably community campus, with a permanent new softball field?
Yes, that is being part of the second turf field that's being installed at the Campus Drive Athletic Complex. It's being lined for softball.
Okay, so what I'm hearing tonight is the city's committed to replace that field at community campus?
100%, yep.
With a permanent field, not temporary?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the planning board is going to be voting on this CIP project at our next meeting, according to the timeline. So I just want to thank the staff and elected officials, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from the public tonight for all the work and information to help with that decision and that vote coming up. I did have a question for the deputy city manager regarding the city's goal to keep debt service under 10%. That's the goal. We're at about 8 something right now. And the majority of the proposed projects are bond funded. So at what point do these projects start to exceed that goal? Like, I don't know, will the city be retiring debt over this CIP between now and 2031, and can assume more? And if I've made myself,
No, I think
I've
you-
made myself clear.
No, it's a great question. I'm trying to identify the graphic that we could make available best, but, well, I think that speaks to it, I guess, as well as folks will see it on screen. So we look at the 6-year window, and it's one of the interesting conversations that we've had is to reflect back on what the 6-year window has looked like and how it reveals itself actually as we succeed into those years in the future. I have a different graphic in my file, but not available to us on screen right now, that would show me that we haven't topped 9% in any year one of our plan looking back 10 years. But you can see, if you looked at the bottom of the screen right now, you can see that in the out years, the last couple of years climb above the 10% threshold. In each of the, I've been around just a handful of years working on the school side, now the city side. I've seen us looking at graphs like this that have shown out years climbing towards 10 and beyond, but we never get there because there's a lot of work that happens between now and then. What I will tell you is, internally, our conversation is that we are climbing closer and closer to a point when 10% is harder and harder to reel back from. You'll see that in this cycle, the current year is at 8% and change, 8.15 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't hit close to 10% until we get into the out years. But there are some big tickets in the future. Right now, one of the numbers that we're looking at is between now and FY30, we'll have to find from the plan that exists right now, not counting other elements that we might add to the plan, other priorities that might arise. From the plan that we're currently looking at, we'll need to push off or drop 10 million or more in order to deliver ourselves to staying within 10% when we reach FY29, 30, FY30. So I guess I hope that the good news is we're mindful of that. It's a great question. We're seeing it. The truth is that the debt load is growing as we tackle more and more projects and deliver more and more for the city. And we're mindful of the fact that we're growing closer.
Thank you.
Does that come close to answering?
Very, very close. Thank you.
What I think I would like to add is that what we will provide at the public hearing, the joint public hearing on the 18th, is the net debt service as a percentage of the general fund budget. This will mean nothing to anybody this far away, but what it shows that, just as an example, in FY17, we projected to be over 10% in FY21, and then when you get to FY21, you're back down at 7.97 with that managed as we go. So this laddered illustration might be helpful to folks who are jumping into the scene to see historically how this has worked.
Great, thank you.
Just to restate the same thing another way, is that as we get closer, the out years don't always come up as they've been planned out. And sometimes that's a difficult thing to discuss with the community, that it was in the CIP for 4 years, and it's still 4 years away 2 years later. And so that's certainly something that when we're talking about getting something into the CIP, if you've advocated for that, that's not the end of that, unless that CIP is certainly this year. And Paul, this is not something I'm telling you, but more for the citizens that are thinking about this question. But, like things like and I'm not picking on Peter, but the transfer station, we might have a private company that, we work with to build something like that, instead of, taking on all of that cost ourselves, or parking garage, all of those things that are going to, we just added $30 million apparently tonight. But that's good planning because it helps recognize other things that we need to prioritize. And the CIP is always going to be the thing that we need to do first and foremost in order to keep our city running. And then there's opportunities to do things that we also want to do and defined as needs to some portion of the population. Any other questions on this, or we get to the public hearing?
One other really quick and easy one.
Yep. Well, they're all easy compared to the parking garage now, Chairman.
That's why I brought that up first. trees. We're a tree city, and there's, $20,000 planned in there. I would advocate for increasing that number. I know there's an element of trees in certain things like the Market Square Master Plan budget overall, but I think having more money available for DPW to consider planting more trees would be a good thing. I'm not going to propose a specific number just yet, but I'm seeing nodding, so.
Thank you.
Councilor Denton.
I'm going to build off of that because I'm planning to motion to increase funding in the CIP at the December 2nd meeting. One of the two items is trees. It sounds kind of silly, but trees are the most effective way we could actually start stopping climate change. And the tree program has been extremely succcennial during the, what was the big celebration we just had? 400 years?
400.
How do we say it?
Josh.
Quadcentennial, whatever it might be.
Quadricentennial.
Thank you. I believe the DPW department gave away, was it 400 trees that year were planted? It was some huge amount.
I need to acknowledge the Rotary.
Rotary, yeah.
Gave some monies in addition to the monies that we had through the city. Yes, it was, we ended up over 400 trees donated and planted, so very successful.
My thought is to increase the funding for trees to $100,000 every year going forward of general funds. Obviously, we can talk about numbers. I just want to make everyone aware that I'm planning to bring that forward. The other item which I'm planning on bringing forward is one of the items that the Sustainability Committee brought forward, which was a study for a city fleet decarbonization plan. This year, we all know that we adopted our Climate Action Plan, which calls for zero municipal emissions by 2040. And I do want to give the city credit that I truly do appreciate that the CIP projects are abiding by the green building policy, which was brought forward by the Sustainability Committee. And I also appreciate the $500,000 that will begin in FY27 to fund a municipal building audit implementation. But that's 2 years from now, and I think it's important to get on the books, and not in an off year, but actually this upcoming year, funding for an RFP for a city fleet decarbonization plan. Just sitting here, I was able to Google cities that did just this. They put out an RFP to get a plan. This plan, much like the Climate Action Plan, would not be to, hey, here's the plan, everything's paid for. No, it's just how we would go about replacing city vehicles so we can meet our goal by 2040. And that, I believe, would have to be general funds. I know ideally, and the city's recommendation talked about going through a nonprofit. And for a lot of these things in the past, we've gone through state funding and federal funding, but we have to be honest with ourselves. There will be no federal funding for any climate action projects like this. And a lot of the state funding comes from the federal government. So I think it'd be worthwhile to get on the books for this upcoming year funding for a city fleet decarbonization plan. Thank you.
Councilor Denton, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to jump on some of the things that Councilor Denton offered and add a few more as well. I first want to thank the school department specifically for coming forward with an addition to the CIP budget around the playgrounds. That has been something that we've heard a lot about as city councilors. But also in the Climate Action Plan, there is a request to provide accommodations for air conditioning in all of our school facilities because of changes in climate, which we were impacted by last year more than this year. But we could anticipate additional heat days for schools in the next 4 to 5 years. And without at least an element in planning for air conditioning in all of our schools, right now we don't have any planning for 6 years out in the CIP. So we really need to address that issue as soon as possible. We also need to be addressing some of the stormwater issues, I think maybe more aggressively because we will not be having federal funds to assist us, considering pumping systems for stormwater post-flooding events because, as we all know, the flooding is increasing. So, and it is more regular than it used to be, and I don't anticipate us getting federal funds for that. So we need to start maybe studying what that means for us long-term. And I do have a question on the enterprise side as far as funding goes. Do we anticipate any regulatory changes or any loss of some of the federal funds? Like right now, we anticipate receiving up to $10 million in fiscal year 27 for the Mechanic Street pumping station upgrade, and I am a little concerned that we're not going to receive those matching funds. So how do we have a contingency plan for what we do when we do not?
At this point, we don't anticipate losing those monies. They're state block grants, which were not cut in the previous administration. That's going to be repeated. There is a benefit to the states, so I'm not sure at this point, how that's going to play out. Obviously, there's a lot of things in flux, but the goal is really to address the need of that pumping station. And, if it turns out that their monies aren't available, obviously we'll have to adjust our plans and reprioritize. But at this point, we don't anticipate, we're not anticipating changes in that. But obviously, we will keep you informed as we find out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Blaylock?
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you to all the department heads and city staff for the presentations. I have a couple questions. And just to be clear, I think we should be, I know this is a planning document, but I think we should be planning on being as fiscally conservative as possible, giving the property revaluations, and just I think we should really be considerate to our taxpayers and try to plan as fiscally conservatively as we can. So under the Greenland, I guess I'll start with the Greenland Road Rec Facility. I guess this is more of a question for Peter Rice. What is the timeline on the laydown area? Like, how long do we plan that being used as a time? And I don't know if there's a contract involved with that or.
We anticipate it'll continue to be used through the Fleet Street construction, which is probably another 2.5, 3 years.
Okay. Okay.
So at this point, it's a valuable space for us to be able to provide for contractors to be able to do work in the city.
Yeah. No, I understand that completely. Just I would love to see a plan to complete that park. And I know right now we've removed it out of the CIP because it's not deemed or deemed 70 years out. But I would love to see a pump track or a basketball court. I know we at one point were talking about a basketball court in that neighborhood. I don't know if that park could handle much more as far as like popularity, other than some green space. But if that's more than 7 years out, then that's fine. But I just would like to state that.
So, Mr. Counselor, we have been approached by some folks to volunteer and to donate monies to do a bicycle pump track.
Okay.
In the area there's an existing pump track which kids have kind of taken on.
Yeah, very familiar with it.
So we're actually starting that effort, and we'll be coming before you all in December to accept those donations. But the contractor that's there is also planning on donating time and materials, as well as a local contractor and consultant. So it's not something that will move forward in that area in the near future to create a nice space for younger kids, in addition to the existing stuff that's there that's more for advanced riders. So that's pretty exciting. That's just literally the last week that we've been made aware of this.
Awesome. No, that's great news. I often see especially on the weekends, the younger kids who more would benefit from a pump track, getting on the skate park, and then the more advanced skaters.
It's not a skateboard pump track. It'll be a bicycle pump track.
Okay, gotcha. On the citizens' request, the Little League lights, I know they had mentioned the other Little League fields, because I had anticipated pushback on Plains or Hislop, but I didn't know if it was any we could ever look at Central Field, down the road. I just drove by there on the way up here tonight, and it's all, Leary's lit up, the dog park's lit up, the tennis courts are lit up, and then it's just kind of dark where the Central Field is, and the only abutters are the library and the middle school. But I would like to look into that. under the sidewalks, I noticed Maple Haven North is getting sidewalks. Is the south not getting sidewalks because of popular demand or because they couldn't come to a consensus?
At this point, there wasn't consensus on the southern side. There appears to be consensus on the northern side.
Yeah.
So, we don't want to force something that folks feel is not wanted.
Yeah.
So at this point, we recently installed we're going to be installing a flashing beacon at a crosswalk at, what is it? I forget the name of the street. Winchester, thank you. Ocean Road and Winchester. So that's a step forward towards getting connectivity between the two sides of the road there.
Okay.
So we anticipate, just because it's not on there doesn't mean they're excluded from being added to it at some point in the future, obviously.
Yeah. I've been reached out by several residents that do want it, but I think they feel frustrated getting consensus. But just wanted to ask for them. I noticed the South Playground that we have $900,000 in FY29. I just didn't know if there's some explanation on the money that we're being used now, and then the planning that's going on at South Playground, as opposed to that money that's out in FY29.
Do you want to speak to it, or?
So, as I said in my presentation, we are currently creating a master plan and design for the playground and the whole South Mill area. The initial playground costs are coming in quite high. So right now we're working with the consultants for options and possible other funding sources. So the 900,000 is in FY29 is definitely more towards the finishing of the permanent restrooms and upgrades to the parking. But the current money that we had from last year is working towards the design and the construction of the playground. And we'll have more to present to you guys on that once we get more.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
So Todd, just quickly on the playground, and Councilor Boyd, keep going. Is there, given the higher cost that is coming for the South Playground and the potential to move the school playgrounds into the CIP process out from is there a possibility of prioritizing some of the school playgrounds that, at least from an educational standpoint, that's a part of the education, and also, kids can choose those playgrounds on days that they're not in school as well, but when you're in school, those are the only playgrounds you get. Is there, a potential refocus on school playgrounds from the South Playground?
Do you want to speak to that, or?
Yeah.
So the city council authorized funding for the South Mill Playground. You would need to rescind that funding, vote to rescind that funding to reappropriate that money at this time.
Okay.
So so that's.
Like we
long
did
and short of it.
recently for all the other projects that we rescinded and reallocated money that was previously appropriated?
Yep,
Yeah.
something similar to that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Bullock.
And on the Safe Playground, I hope that there's spaces left for sledding. I hope that is part of I know that came up in the conversation.
We have had those conversations.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We are planning on doing that.
Okay, good. My last question, I guess, is under the citywide facilities capital improvements. I noticed that there was removal for the boiler room chimney. I didn't know if that has to get HDC approval or if that's, I've always considered that a historic structure, but I didn't, I would be sad to see it get removed.
So the reason that structure is still there is in the memory of Harold Whitehouse. He fought vociferously to keep it. It currently does nothing other than having a historic appearance. Obviously, if the city council wants to appropriate money to maintain that, that's your choice. I would not recommend that.
Okay.
It's a structure that doesn't provide any utility to the city. So.
Thank you, Councilor Bullock. Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Mayor. Just the questions for Nathan around the subject of parking garages. do we find that they generally pay their own debt service out of revenues? I know that there's a Foundry had a lull at first when it was at 30 or 40% capacity, but now it's running pretty strong.
The new guy wants to defer this question. Andrew, there's a microphone somewhere. You want us to help? I don't want to misspeak.
If you go back on the history of the Foundry and the how we funded it, we knew that it wouldn't pay its debt service. So we knew the whole parking structure itself could handle it, and that's how we planned it. So, it depends on what you would do in the future for a new building. But when we did the Foundry, when you look at the pro forma, if you go back to the meetings, we say, well, the meters and everything else, the violations, everything will pay for the Foundry. So right now, I think, what is the debt service on that? I don't have it on the top of my head, but I do not believe the Foundry is paying its debt service.
Right.
So if I may, it's also price structured in a manner to keep it
Yes.
attractive for people to use. So it wasn't intended out of the gate to do that.
Right. Oh, very good public purpose, particularly the employee
And
part.
you have to look at the parking system as a whole. You can't just look at one element and say it has to be self-supporting. So you got to look at, and the chairman's point about identifying that's an out-year cost is helpful because that'll then help us plan and project what rates are necessary to be able to cover those costs.
Right, and that would purely exist in the enterprise, the parking enterprise fund. It would not be out of the.
Technically, the parking special revenue fund, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the parking director is here if there are any other specific, revenue type questions, who's much more versed than I am.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to enlighten us so that the idea of a parking garage isn't so scary.
Right.
When you look at the enterprise fund and what we've built up, and the fact that, unlike most cities, 70% of our parking downtown is public, which is a revenue stream that we use to reinvest in our parking infrastructure. So a couple other questions, if I could, Mayor. Director Rice, if you could just enlighten us on Prescott Park, what's next? In last year's CIP and budget, we approved a $4.5 million bond issue to get started on the drainage, moving the building, all of that. Are we still on track for that?
That's correct.
Okay, so something would come to us, in the new year, a bond issue to do that.
Not a bond issue at this time. You have authorization, and once we identify the cost, we have some residual monies to get the design moving forward, but once the cost is identified, that's when we would come to you. So it may not be this coming year, it may be the year after that the bonding would be requested.
And I also noticed on page 35, we've got a list of authorized but not issued, and we had $1.75 million for Prescott Park in that. Would that be something that we could apply to the renovations in the park?
Yeah, there's a total authorized, I believe, of $7.8 million available for the buildings and the drainage improvements.
Okay. And last question on that, if you could just enlighten us on what are the things that were pushed out past FY30, which elements in the master plan? I mean, what I'm hearing is we're going to move the Shaw, we're going to get the drainage fixed, we're going to create the grassy bowl that really is the drainage, and the electrical and the plumbing and the seawall. Would that be sort of the program of work?
Roughly, yes. The players' ring originally was not envisioned in the master plan. However, based on the last couple of years of inundation, it became very apparent that if we're raising one historic structure, we should probably address the second historic structure as well. The seawall aspect is probably taking a back seat because of the cost relative to that. So the things that have been pushed out on the planning horizon were all the other, the relocation of the formal gardens, the boardwalks, a lot of the things that, based on recent input, didn't seem to have consensus relative to what exactly folks wanted to see. So those elements are pushed out of the planning horizon. However, that's not to mean we won't be doing maintenance on the existing infrastructure at the park during this time period.
Right. I was curious why the Market Square redo was moved to the general fund and out of parking. There's a note in that element.
It had to do with the ability to cover the costs. Currently, as you know, the parking fund, based on budget, we're in deficit expense, and where we're at, the Hanover Garage has had 300 spaces out of commission, so the deficit spending was understood relative to that. However, our fund balance would quickly be exhausted if we put $1 million at a time into Market Square. So it was really based on that, the reflection of that. Obviously, rates can be adjusted, but I would not recommend doing that lightly. We have a very efficient and well-run parking fund, and it's spun off, as the parking director would tell you, $6 million of revenue, roughly, of services, and $2.5 million directly. This is a significant benefit to the city. The downtown amenities are funded mainly by those revenues. So we were concerned that if we overextended, we could kill the goose that was, laying the golden egg. So we wanted to make sure we were being prudent on how we were using those revenues and really just expend the monies that we know we have versus projecting out.
In other words, we're tapping it pretty hard right now with
Right.
real revenue from
Yes.
the other parking garage, the 300 spaces. Last question for Nathan, I suppose. When Pat Ainsley left, we asked at the budget that she was involved in, what's the most important thing to streamline operations for the city? And she said the new financial software. So how quickly do you think that can be implemented?
We got started a lot more quickly than I might have imagined because Pat made sure the RFP went out as her parting gesture. So we are moving well in that direction. Right now, our basic projection is that we'll have demonstrations here in January. We expect a final decision certainly within a few days or weeks of the demos being completed, enter into negotiations, but we fully expect to be beginning our implementation in the first half of 25. We're working now on crafting a plan for the best implementation cutover moment for payroll, for the ledger, but those things start to feel like Januaries and Julys that are right ahead of us. We had a great conversation recently with another community here in New Hampshire who has just completed 5 years, Concord, just completed 5 years working with one of the solutions that's before us. They had their core elements done in the first year or two and were very judicious about implementing smaller ancillary elements of the package. I expect that we will, within the first 2 years, see our payroll and our ledger on board. And I guess I'm not really prepared yet to talk about the other, smaller projects. The biggest concern is finding the right solution for our core accounting, as well as putting some tools in the hands of the Human Resources Department, because so much of what those two departments are doing right now are still very manual.
Okay. And the element, she said that there's a operating impact. Is that because we're going to cloud-based and leasing?
Yes, and if I may, I would take the opportunity to double down on what I said earlier, that we're keeping capital outlay at a low level. recognizing that things like the body cams and tasers that we talked about are finding their way to the non-operating. We anticipate that other projects like the new accounting software will make their way into the SBITA category and be there in non-operating. This is, we have seen implementations, like I said, somewhere between $500,000 and rising towards $3 million. But what was most interesting is that the carrying costs rise from $50,000 or $60,000 that we're using as a number in the past to anywhere between $150,000 and $500,000 of annual cost. So, but for good solutions and in the cloud. So we lose responsibility for backups and virus protection and other security elements.
Okay, that's all I had, except to thank everybody for all the work they did. It's great.
Councilor Moreau.
Thank you. I have a few questions, and I think Director Rice is going to be able to answer most of them. Can you tell us what our obligations are at the Connors Cottage as far as facilities maintenance? I know it's on your list of capital improvements this year.
The bottom floor, the basement, is the city's responsibility. Everything above it is PHA's.
And have we secured the easements for the Coakley connector?
We have not, but we've had, we're in the process of putting the easement language together. We've done the appraisal, and we've had conversations with both property owners, and both seem amenable.
Can you next tell us why Pinehurst Road improvements have been pushed off so far?
Because the original reason for it to come on seems to have dissipated. So it does not, at this point, seem to be.
Because it was drainage for the.
It was a drainage challenge.
Yeah. And lastly, my pet peeve, State Street two-way. We had 500,000 in for fiscal year 26, and we had put 1.5 in for fiscal year 27. You now have 50,000 for more studies when we already have a study. So exactly what are you looking for?
So the last study did not look at the pedestrian nor non-traffic related things, such as delivery vehicles. If you go down there on any particular day, you'll see a truck pulled out and double parking in the street. If you have a two-way situation, you're creating a serious bottleneck, and then in order to accommodate those things, in order to accommodate the two-way traffic, you're likely going to have to widen the road again, which is realigning the curb line, which adjusts the drainage. The study that was done did not look at all those ancillary things. So the concern was that if we went along without having a real firm idea of what the impacts would be, we would be misrepresenting what the costs were, as well as the benefits by that study were negligible. So that was and it did not evaluate. It was a traffic benefit that was negligible. It did not identify what the pedestrian benefits were, because it did not look at what was going to be necessary to adjust those sidewalks. So what we felt was appropriate was to do a more thorough study to identify those things, to bring that back to you so that you could make a more informed decision.
So how long is that going to take?
It shouldn't take that long, 6 months maybe.
If I may, Your Honor, I think the idea of that study is to better inform a total project cost, which is well in excess of the previously discussed amount.
Thank you.
Just a couple of questions for, I think it's Peter. So is the Kate Street Bridge the last bridge that we have really to do? I see 50,000 in bridge improvements for the rest of the out years.
Yeah, those monies are really to do the upgrades necessary to maintaining expansion joints and the work that needs to be done to maintain existing bridges versus building a new bridge. The Kate Street Bridge is not the last bridge that needs to be done. The Coakley Bridge, Coakley Road Bridge needs to be addressed, and there's also the pedestrian bridge on Market Street going into Osprey Landing. No, what is it? Yeah, Osprey
Granite
Landing.
Street.
Yeah. That needs to be addressed as well. So there are additional bridge expenses out there. There is some discussion whether that pedestrian bridge is necessary at this time, given that we could potentially have a signalized intersection. Well, we have a signalized intersection there now, and you could have an at-grade crossing. So there's some discussion relative to if that's an appropriate crossing at that location.
Okay. And why did the state come back and say they wanted to look at Coakley, Kate Street, that whole Hodgson Way?
I'm not sure what drove them to that, but we're having a meeting coming up this month to advance that project. It may be that they connected the signalization project at Coakley Cottage and realizing that in order to accommodate that, you really need to address the Kate Street Bridge. So from a timing standpoint, they may have realized that it would be good to get that pushed forward.
Okay. Councilor Barr, did you have a question on that?
Not on that, no.
Okay, just two more questions then. So, Elwyn Park, is there, do we have consensus on this? We found that the cost has gone up. Is there consensus on what's going to take to go forward on this?
We'll be going to the neighborhood probably in January to have a meeting. There seemed to be solid consensus relative to the first phase that we're proposing, which is around the Dondero School itself, and some of the intersections to improve the alignment on a couple of the McKinley intersections. So one of the things that was outstanding was seeing the cross-section of the roadway and the sidewalk at each property so that people understood where the proposed sidewalk would fall and whether they would lose their right-of-way, which is city right-of-way, and how that would impact the front of their property. So that was one thing that was outstanding that we are planning on presenting in January.
Got it. Thanks. Councilor Barty.
It's kind of related to Gate Street, but is Bartlett Street, and I know we received, or there was funding to study the rail bridge over Bartlett Street. And I'm wondering what the status of that is, where that went, what does that do?
So that's a federal grant that we're working on. The grant has not been formally issued. We've had a series of meetings with the federal government, and most recently, a couple weeks ago, that was supposedly the last meeting before the grant was going to be issued. So, and then the study would look at what it would take to, was it feasible to modify that bridge.
And then Bartlett Street, now that it is redone or almost completed, will become busy again. And the intersection for the pedestrians crossing there is a little scary still, even though we have flashing lights, people coming around the corner, coming outbound on Islington Street, don't see them until they're kind of going maybe too fast.
Sure. We are moving forward to install an additional flashing sign on the Popawili side of the bridge that would be tied to all the other rapid flashing beacons.
That's
so that's
great.
an additional light that's we're in the process of securing and moving forward with.
And then I had a question for Al Pratt, if I could. The PFAS situation, it appears as though the EPA is finding more and more reason to identify more and more PFAS chemicals, which is good that they're finding them. What is the impact on our filtering systems with the new rules from EPA?
Well, the latest rule with the 4 parts per trillion limits, although the chemicals, except for PFBA, I believe, are long chain PFAS. So the carbon that we're using and they're intending to use for Greenland and the Portsmouth Collins wells, we'll be fine taking those out. And the PFBA, which is one of the shorter chain compounds, that has a very high limit that the EPA has put on there, so we don't have a concern with that. We don't have that level of PFBA in the water.
Thanks. That's it. And thank you, everybody. This has been very informative.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and thanks to the planning board that is here this evening. We will now open it up to public comment. Well, where's the stand for public comment? Oh, it's behind, perfect.
Good evening. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all your time, Your Honor, Mayor, heads of the department, and counselors. I'm here to support and speak in favor of the CIP Citizen Request 24-8. It's the sidewalk improvement around Middle Street to Lafayette Road, Middle Road to Lafayette Park. The city has done so much over the last 5 years, and it's been successful. The police department, the recreation department, the Department of Public Works, to do traffic calming along Middle Road, and our neighbors are out. We're crossing the street, but the little triangle that's in Middle Road, people can't cross that way. You know, from coming up from the Middle Hill Apartments that are on Route 1, and coming from the playground across to Lafayette Park and further on down to the ham store or whatever, or coming the other way from Hillside Drive down to DeStefano's. We don't have a sidewalk on that side, and so I think that I heard that there's the further on down part of Middle Road is in the budget. I think Director Rice said that it's in the Greenland Road, Middle Road, it's in the 27-29 budget. So this is just a little piece that we really do hope, it's on the existing CIP plan, and I think it was prioritized by the Department of Public Works, but I just wanted to.
You know who you are, but for the
Oh, I'm sorry. I am, you guys, you get gold stars. I'm tired. I'm Becky Macbeth, and I live at 243 Middle Road. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Becky.
Hi, I'm Susan Sterry, and I live here in Portsmouth, but I'm also co-chair of our cemetery, historic cemeteries here in Portsmouth. And by the way, the city doesn't own any, we only own historic cemeteries right now. We have very limited space up in Cotton Cemetery. I want to thank everybody in the past 4 years that have been helping our committee. We've gotten a lot of little things done, which is really great. And I especially want to thank Corin Hallowell and his crew, that our cemeteries haven't looked as good in a number of years. And whenever I go by, because I live in downtown Portsmouth, there are always people in our cemeteries now, mostly tourists, but that's all right. I just want to, show our appreciation of how well the city has been doing for our community. Mine is procedural question. A lot of our larger projects, like rebuilding stone walls down at Point of Graves, which, by the way, is the oldest cemetery maybe in the state of New Hampshire. We have headstones down there from the 1620s. And we go through, there's some 1800s in that cemetery, too. Well, a lot of our projects, large, expensive projects, are associated with CIP events that I noticed some of them have been pushed back, especially down the Mechanic Street, which is where the stone wall needs to be repaired. How many times can a project be pushed out or taken off and put back on in any length of time? Because some of the things that we've been looking for grants for are matching funds, and we're not in a position to do that right now. So if we're pushing back Mechanic Street project right now, which we were going to, Peter was going to suggest that our cemetery rebuild, or the wall rebuild, be connected with that project. If it's not going to happen for another 4 or 5 years, we would definitely have to look for grants to proceed. So, and there's a couple other projects that got pushed out. So that's my question: how often and how long can CIP be pushed out?
It's not typically a question and
I
answer,
know.
but they can be pushed out forever indefinitely. So there's no limit to being able to push something out until it is actually passed in the current year CIP. And so that's why it's a fluid document, and there's certainly externalities where other projects are tied to that.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Kranz. I live at 5 Plains Avenue. I'm the greenhouse next to the baseball field. My public comment tonight has now turned into a thank you. I just thought it was important that you all saw the face behind the long email. And I also thought it was important for you guys to recognize when you listen to public input that it has direct feedback on quality of life. I'm wearing a couple hats tonight. I obviously live right next to the baseball field. I'm a proud Little League mom. My kid just did his first Little League season. My husband coached. So we are a very supportive Portsmouth Little League family. I've also worked in municipal recreation for almost 15 years now. And I'm very pleased that the committee listened to the input from our neighbors and recognized that although it's very tempting to want to support these projects because they do tug on your heartstrings, that first and foremost, quality of life and safety comes first. And I know I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of my neighbors tonight when I say that we've already demonstrated a huge amount of flexibility with Portsmouth Little League in just the regular season. So when we caught wind that they were looking to do lights at Plains Field so that they could host state and regional tournaments, that really concerned us. So thank you again for listening to our input, and I hope that if this conversation does come up in the future, that you all keep in mind the safety of our neighborhood. Thank you.
Hello, Kate Hatem, 1 Ash Street. I just wanted to take this opportunity in front of the full council and the planning board to reiterate the importance of a project that I've been advocating for the past year and a half. The elementary school playground project requested by the school department is critical and important for the PEEP and elementary school children of Portsmouth. As some of you know, my advocacy began after my son broke his arm at the Little Harbor Playground in May of 2023. I've been working hard to try to move this project forward so that no other child or family will have to suffer the agony that we did. My son's left arm snapped in half. When I arrived at Little Harbor at that day, he was screaming in pain and his arm was visibly deformed. But I feel like I need to say that in some respects, he was lucky that it was only his arm and not his neck or his back, which it very easily could have been. He missed out on a year of soccer, rock climbing, and other activities he was looking forward to, instead of a lifetime of missing those things, though, if it had been a neck or back injury. For that, I'm thankful. It's not lost on me that it could have been much worse. The elementary school playgrounds are turning into a liability for both the school department and for the city. The Little Harbor Playground's almost 25 years old. It's rusting, has exposed metal shards all over the structures. The movable mechanisms are failing, it's not accessible for all, and it simply would not stand up to current ADA and safety codes or recommendations. I want to prevent a situation like the one my family suffered through from needlessly happening to other families. In New Hampshire, the Department of Health and Human Services has a playground safety suggestion document. I've got it right here. There are 19 items on that list that should be regularly inspected. At the Little Harbor Playground, half of those 19 are failing. Half. A school playground that is not maintaining half of the safety recommendations as recommended by DHHS is a failure on the part of the city and the school department. It is simply unacceptable for our children and the youngest residents in our city. You have an opportunity here to accept and fund this request as soon as possible to help be a critical part of the solution, ensuring that our children have a safe and accessible place to play every single school day. Now, I had thought South Mill Pond was off the table, but Mayor McEachran, you brought that up tonight, and I would happily support the council, and I know a lot of other parents and residents feel the same way, to reallocate those funds that were designated for South Mill to the elementary school playgrounds. Not because South Mill isn't a great project, I think that's an amazing project, but I think the kids of Portsmouth are really a priority. and they don't have a choice about where they play every day. As I've said before, the cost of playgrounds has also skyrocketed. The estimate for Little Harbor is about $500,000, and that's not for a fancy playground. It's for a simple, accessible equipment, a semi-permeable surface that by law is now required when you renovate a playground. The rubbery material alone, that's often referred to as pour in place, will cost about $150,000 for Little Harbor alone. It's simply not appropriate nor feasible to expect that parents manage and fund a project of this magnitude. I hope you will all vote to support and then fund this critical playground project as soon as possible. And I'm happy to chat with anyone afterwards, as I've accumulated a wealth of knowledge over the last year and a half about this subject matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ashley Blackington. I live at 65 Mendham Ave. I am Kate's partner in crime in this playground crusade. We started this project almost 2 years ago, and one of the first things we did was survey the Little Harbor community, because that's who we have access to as parents at that school. At the time, we had 200 respondents to around 370 families that are in the school, or 370 children in the school. The school board recently, there's been a lot of discussion about redistricting and all of those pieces that are top of mind, I think, with a lot of things in the city. But one of the numbers that came out of that was there are 937 children in the city of Portsmouth. We did another survey a couple of weeks ago, and had respondents representing 105 children, and every single person that responded to that survey supported reallocating funds so that the children at the schools in the city their issues with accessibility and with safety and compliance would be addressed first before moving forward with citywide projects. As Kate said, and I ditto everything that she has said, and also want to underline that playground equipment is really only supposed to last between 8 and 12 years. The playground's 25 years old. We've reached out to New Franklin PTO and the Dondero PTA to talk about how this can all move forward together, because this project did originally start as 2 parents from one school, but realizing that there's an opportunity here for the city to address accessibility and compliance for all the families, all the children within the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Hi, my name is Molly Wilson. I live at 1360 South Street. I started to approach the Parking Traffic Safety Committee in 2018 when my oldest child started kindergarten, and we had to cross 2 busy roads to get to the bus stop to go to Dondero. We've worked together a lot over the years to do some temporary traffic calming measures in our neighborhood, but I was the citizen that put in the citizen request for sidewalks on the south side of South Street. So I'm just asking for your support in that. And also to echo what Becky Macbeth said earlier about the triangle at Middle Road and South Street. People kind of approach it and then see the green light ahead going towards the high school and go real fast past my house. And there's a lot of kids at that playground trying to get across the road there. So at the dawn of redistricting for the elementary schools in the city, where the Lafayette Park children are going to go to Little Harbor, it looks like it's really important now to think about those physical measures that we can do to make that area safer for walkers and bike riders to get where they need to go. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Petra Huda, 280 South Street. So I know this is a new process, and I'd like to clarify that this is our first public hearing, and according to the city manager, this will be the only presentation that is to be given. So when it comes in front of the council, everything will be complete, and the only thing that is left to be done is the council to approve it. I know you can't answer, but that's the question in my mind.
Well, it's going before the planning board. and then it comes to the council, where we have a public hearing at the council, a public hearing at the planning board as well, correct?
Well, the joint meeting with the council and the planning board will be part of the next council regular meeting
Yeah.
on the 18th. And if so choose, the council could continue the public hearing, you could continue the public hearing to the planning board meeting on the 21st.
Okay, thank you. My next question or comment is, so this is for FY26, and when I look at, I guess it's a debt service page, I think it's number 16, you're giving us projected debt using the June 30th, 2024 numbers. So I guess my question would be, why are we using the 2024 numbers, especially for the debt calculation, when we do have a new modified local assessed valuation that is going to change that? Do we have the most accurate information here going to the council on that? Based on the same comment, my next question is on page 35 of your presentation. We have the same date on top of that. That is as of June 30th, 2024. And that's where the valuation number is. And it's, I guess, 10 billion. So that's going to change. I think it will change your debt calculation also. So maybe the question should be asked, can we use the most of the latest data? Next question I would like to address, while you're looking at giving more money for CIP projects, on the same page is your authorized but unissued. Now, I'm looking at the dates that are on here, and if this is as of June 24, you have also you should have had on here the Pease wastewater treatment plant that you authorized, but the bonds were unissued till after that period, and that's $20 million. That's a lot of money. That also affects this. Right now, your authorized unissued is sitting at $22 million. Of that, you have sidewalks, you have the police station, and you also have quite a few water projects. So that money was allocated and authorized by councils all the way back to 2017, 2015. So the money's there. The question would be, do we really need these projects, and should the money be here or reallocated to something else that is coming up now? The last question I would have on your bond schedules are, we have had $400,000 in there since 2021 for mold remediation and fixing of the police station, current police. What is the status of the mold remediation? Is it done, and is there any money left? There is also a request in there for $2.8 million to move forward. My question is, what is that for? As there is still $900,000 that was allocated for the police station that hasn't been used. It's still in authorized, unissued. So you have not bonded for that. So those are the questions, some of the questions that I would have, and I will probably have more going forward if we get another chance to ask the questions. And hopefully the council will be asking the same questions, because $20 million makes a big difference in your calculations, and you're going to get a lot of help from your new modified assessed valuation on your bonding if that goes in there. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Jill Lathan, 29 Ocean Court, and I want to thank you guys for this opportunity. I just want to say I recognize your role and your position and how difficult it is, the decision that you're making. I myself am the DPW Commissioner for Somerville, Mass. I have had Portsmouth be my home for the last 7 years, and what you guys are doing on a daily basis is commendable. I'm here to advocate and to support our youth. The return on investment in Portsmouth is our youth. and that is our playgrounds. And I think it's phenomenal that we're going to be expending $1.8 million over the next 4 years or so in the CIP funding. That will not be enough. It is a good start. It is a good start. But I want to employ this committee and the mayor and the city council members to continue to invest in our youth. They are our future. They are our future. It is important that we find ways not only to continue to invest in our sidewalks, in our infrastructure, in our downtown tourism. That is phenomenal. People want to be in Portsmouth. People want to work, live, and play in Portsmouth. Work, live, and play in Portsmouth. Our parks and recreation are phenomenal. Our playgrounds need to be phenomenal. That is about community investment. That is about investing in our future, investing in us as human beings to make that connection with one another. We make those connections in our playgrounds, in our fields, in our recreation, in our parks. It's great that we have infrastructure and water and sewer improvements. I love it. It's great that we have infrastructure in building our sidewalks in our downtown. Our infrastructure has to be at some point our youth. So I employ this committee and the members of the DPW and everyone that makes hard decisions for our city. And I know I make them every day in Somerville. I know how difficult they are. I want to employ you guys and everyone to continue to invest in our youth, continue to invest in the infrastructure that is our youth. And let's celebrate. Let's work, live, and play here in Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Seeing no one else rise, and me turning back to the table. Nobody on Zoom. I'd like to thank, again, everyone. Councilor Cook, question?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to see if I could follow up with a question.
Sure.
Specifically, there's been a request to kind of move up the school playground process. But I'm looking here at the budget, and we had planning and design for fiscal year 26 and implementation starting in fiscal year 27. So I just have a question on logistics. I know these processes take a long time, and this seems to me already like a really ambitious timeline if we started planning. Am I right to think that this is pretty ambitious already, that we'd only have 1 year of planning and already start?
So the school playgrounds do not fall under my purview. It really depends on based on my experience with playgrounds, it depends on how much design and customization you're looking for in a playground. If you just got a cookie cutter type playground, you go right to the manufacturer and you can get mats instead of the poured in place that meet the ADA compliance. There's ways to move forward that are quicker. But where this is, Little Harbor in particular is within the wetlands boundary, shoreline protection area, it likely will require a bit of permitting. But Brian and the school department would be responsible for that.
It's possible that the reason Little Harbor is first, not only because of the concern from the public, but that needs the most amount of design. We have wetlands issues, we have water runoff issues, we have to move it from one side of the building to the other. We also have to do a specific one for PEEP, for the preschool program. So there's a lot more involved in that particular one, which involves much more design, although I think we could do it in the time frame as allotted right now, but to move it up, we may be pushing the envelope if we do that as far as time, because if we want to, we'd rather do it right than be in a hurry and not get it right the first time around.
Could I add a comment to that too, just because I have a lot of background information about this?
So unfortunately, Kate, we can circle back after this, but this is we have public comment and then we have the questions, but I do appreciate.
I'd love to give you guys more information afterwards.
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out what a reasonable time frame looks like for us to actually get there. And so that's what I was just trying to determine.
Well, we discussed it with the city. And Peter had some great information to help us because he's been doing it with other parts of the city. But it is, we trying to do it in the proper time frame, which is why we put it in the CIP in the years that we did.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone again for coming out and for the discussion, and we will have a further discussion at the next council meeting. Thank you to the planning board.
Thank you.
With that, we will adjourn. And no mallet, nothing, just